I want to transition a little and head down into Granny's basement
Mm-hmm.
because I have a
Yes.
story. I have a story. I
Ah.
don't know if you have a story this time, but I
I
have
do
one.
have a story that
Nice.
you can share. You can
Mine, well,
share.
mine is gentle. Like mine is not.
Uh-huh.
So, well, why don't we start with mine
Yeah.
and see where it goes?
Yeah.
I have to read it because I don't memorize
Hmm.
things.
No, me
So
neither. I got some.
this yeah. So this story is loosely around the theme of moving around, which is today's
Hmm.
theme, but it's called the nomadic keepsake. I moved quite a bit when I was a kid. My dad was in the army, and every few months it seemed like we were packing up and heading to a new base, a fresh start, and an unfamiliar town. Each moving truck that came was like a giant reset button in my life, and at each location I collected memories like some kids collect stamps or comic books. These memories often came in the form of small keepsakes, tokens I'd find in the nooks and crannies of these temporary homes, perhaps left behind by a previous army family who had also called the place home for a fleeting chapter of their lives. One such keepsake was a small marbled blue glass stone, almost like an oversized marble or an undersized crystal ball. I found it on the windowsill of what became my bedroom in a two-story house in Fort Hood. I was 9 and it immediately drew me in. I pocketed it and imagined it was maybe a piece of the sky that had fallen during a particularly spectacular storm. That stone traveled with me from state to state, a consistent figure in a menagerie of childhood collectibles. It heard my whispered fears at night before starting at each new school, felt the reverberation of my excitement as my mother recounted the adventures we'd have in each new locale, and it glinted under the moonlight on those restless nights when sleep was just a battle I couldn't win. As I grew older, the moves became more challenging. Saying goodbye to friends, starting to sting a little more, the hellos felt more cautious and less enthusiastic. The glass stone became a symbol of constancy in a sea of change. By the time I hit my teens, something odd happened. On the eve of yet another move, this time leaving the cold winters of Fort Drum for the sunny shores of San Diego, I realized the stone had disappeared. I tore apart my room searching for it, but came up empty. The loss felt monumental, like I had left behind a piece of my identity, a silent guardian that had journeyed with me through countless transitions. It wasn't until years later, long after the moving had stopped, that I returned to Fort Hood as an adult, that that the mystery of the Bluestone unfolded. I was there to pay my respects to my late father, a brave man who served his country with everything he had. After the memorial service on a nostalgic meandering walk, I found myself standing outside the old two-story house that had once been mine for a brief period. The property was well kept, with warm lights casting a welcoming glow through the windows. I couldn't resist. I walked up to the door and knocked. A friendly couple answered, and I explained my connection to the house. They invited me in for coffee and a walk down memory lane. As we talked, my gaze wandered to the windowsill where I had found my blue glass stone all those years ago. There, to my astonishment, was a small collection of marbled blue stones arranged neatly in a little row. The couple noticed my stare, and the lady smiled. "Oh, those. Our son puts them there. He keeps finding them in the yard. Funny, no matter how many times we pick them up, there's always a new one after a storm." In that moment, an indescribable warmth filled me. I had lost my keepsake, but somehow it had returned to where it belonged, only to become a keepsake again for another young army kid, weathering his storms, navigating his beginnings and endings. And just like that, the story of the blue glass stone continued, a legacy unwittingly shared, a touchstone for the nomadic hearts that found comfort within these walls. I left the house with a light heart, feeling unexpectedly whole. The nomadic keepsake hadn't been lost, it had simply found its way home, and in doing so taught me that maybe, just maybe, the real keepsake was never the stone itself, but the journey it represented.
Nice.
And that's the story of the nomadic. Wait, what's it called? My computer froze. The nomadic
Wasn't
keepsake.
yeah.
There it is.
um, yeah. Like what a nice way to fit that, in, right? Like to come back to where everything was and to see it. It
Yeah, and how those memories just kind of, they stay with you. I think it just stays
Absolutely.
with you. And it came full circle for him. I love that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That is your story is way better than mine. My story is just this little tiny story that I found on Reddit. And it was just
Yeah.
because I was more looking to see about like, how people viewed moving around, and
Mm.
how like, does it affect you and like the things that, you know, with all those changes and everything. And so it's a very, very short like
That's
paragraph. And
good.
it was just interesting. It's not anything great, but um, this lady was like, I had made another post, but this is the underlining theme. I'm scared if we have to keep renting that my kids will have a really hard childhood. If we have to switch schools all the time, when our rentals get sold, or we need to move for more room or something. My 7-year-old daughter has anxiety and takes quite a while to adapt to new situations and people. My 5-year-old boy is shy, but doesn't seem too anxious about change just yet. What are your thoughts on moving around? And so, like, I went through
Mm.
like like the comments and everything like that. And, I think what I found was like a lot of people were, it depends on the kid. It really
Mhm.
does, because again, like I said, I think moving can definitely have an impact on you. And certainly everyone is different. But it's how you deal with it. Right. And I think that
Mhm.
that's part of your personality. Um, which also, again, I think shapes you with the moves that you make. Right. So,
Well, I think
but
it definitely contributes to resilience, right? Like people have life is about change. And yes,
hmm
there's some change that we can control, and in those situations we have to decide if it is something we're going to control or not, because we get to make
yeah.
those choices, especially if you're the adult making choices and decisions for kids.
hmm
But it's not the end all be all, right? If you have to move because you need more space, or your landlord sells your house, I think it's probably a better lesson to teach your kids to look at those types of changes in a positive way and learn to find your way through that, rather than kids seeing parents being overly anxious, overly worried, or
hmm
feeling like something's unfair, right? Because sometimes you just can't control things, and you have to
No.
find the good in the bad situation. And
Yeah.
I think that's a skill that even adults need to learn.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I
Mhm.
think, yeah, like it depends on the person. Just because you have anxiety doesn't necessarily mean that moving around is going to affect you and you're going to be more anxious because of it. Um, but I think it can definitely mold you, right? And
Well, totally. And I was thinking about like grandparents. That's what we kind of think about in this podcast, is family heritage and history and all those things too. And I, on one hand, I think, oh, our grandparents all kind of stayed put, right? Lived on the farm, maybe moved
hmm
to another farm, and in our case, maybe back and forth between provinces a couple times. And so I was dismissing that they would understand, maybe they were more settled. But then I realized their parents all emigrated from overseas somewhere.
yes.
They had massive moves, massive change, a completely different life. And
hmm
that type of courage, that type of resilience, we have never had to face something like that.
No,
We've never been
no,
in a war torn country or had to escape
no,
or had to, so I feel like in many ways the levels of anxiety, and not to minimize or diminish
no,
that people do feel anxiety, but I do feel sometimes it's a luxury we have to be able to think through how to manage, right? And how to look
hmm
or frame a situation where a lot of people even now, and certainly our great grandparents, did not have that same
no,
ability
they didn't.
or option to think it through and make informed decisions. They had to do what, even the big hard scary things. I can't imagine how scary it would be in that time. You couldn't look it up on the internet. You're literally getting on a ship and going across the world and
Well,
not
and you're
knowing.
hoping that you make it to the other side too,
Yeah. Yeah.
because you're going onto this great big unknown, really,
Mhm.
and you're leaving everything that you've ever known your whole life and going on an adventure. um, that you have no idea what's going to be at the end of that, or if you're going to make it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I couldn't imagine. And like being on a ship with like a bunch of other people who are doing the same thing, like it's not, like it's just a group.
Hmm.
I mean, obviously you're going there with a bunch of other people, but it's a huge change, right?
And
You're
it's
leaving everything.
completely unknown,
Hmm.
Yeah.
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 Well, I mean,
So
and I think, oh, go ahead.
oh, I was just reiterating that I think it, I think we don't appreciate sometimes the levels of choice we have.
Hmm.
And I do think we have to consider how it impacts our kids. It's not an easy world, right? There's
No.
definitely uh, transition is difficult, change is difficult for people. But I also think remembering that I would rather have to navigate change than never have the option to have anything change or to be forced into
Hmm.
a situation that is like going to be damaging.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, like, kind of in those those certain situations, it does sort of bring the family together too, because you really only have each other.
Yeah.
um, so you have that family bonding and support, right? Family coming together to
Mhm.
help with those changes, and it might be rough or hard, but at least you guys are together.
Yeah.
I sort of couldn't imagine just kind of being on your own and doing some of those things. Like even our
Mhm.
grandparents doing those things on their own. You know, um,
Well, I think that's where community and like neighbors and and extended family became really important, right? Because
mhm.
you had to rely on each other for your own survival, for safety. And even now, as we have family that's kind of all over the place, but I can't really think of any cousin or family member that I couldn't phone up and say I need help,
No,
or I need a place
yeah,
to crash, or I'm coming through and they wouldn't welcome. And like, we don't all agree on everything, different politics, different ideas, different types of lives,
absolutely,
all of that, right?
yeah,
But it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, I still would open my arms and door to anybody that needed it, and I know they would too.
hmm
So there's something
yeah. I think
about
we're
that, but we don't
fortunate that way.
utilize that in the way that our grandparents did, right? Because
No,
I feel like we're a little more isolated. And that is something like
hmm
working and learning. I work a lot in First Nation communities, and that's something that I've really noticed is quite different. The idea of support and helping each other is much stronger and much like
oh,
they don't necessarily want to be adventurers going everywhere because the being close to the community is vital.
hmm and I think that's
So
so special. I do like their communities are. It's amazing. It's I wish
mhm.
we had, like, I wish our communities were more together. Like
Well, what there's
I
some of
feel.
us are learning, right? We're trying to
Uh
learn
huh.
what and I talk about it in my work and we talk about it as a team, but
Hmm.
it's the difference between a we set like a we mentality versus a me mentality, right?
Yeah.
We kind of everybody the me mentality is everybody fend for yourself and like figure it out
Hmm.
and don't ask for help and
No.
you're on your own, but the we mentality is no, we have to support each other and we're a community and
Yeah.
we need each other, we're connected. And that's how human beings are kind of meant to be. We're pack animals. We're not
Yes.
not meant to
No.
be isolated. And yeah,
And
but
fending for
it's
ourselves, and
interesting. Yeah.
yeah.
But I think back
Yeah.
to your Reddit story. I think parents are genuinely concerned that they might make a wrong decision or it might
Hmm.
shape their kids. And yet, I think maybe they're asking the wrong question, right? The question isn't, am I going to damage my child if I have to move them around because of like very genuine circumstances? I think the question is more, how can I make this a positive experience for all of us
Hmm.
and learn resilience and learn excitement and adventure and embracing new things, because even changing that frame doesn't mean that those negative things aren't going to happen, but you can't control them
Hmm.
anyways. So is it
Yeah.
better to sort of frame it in a way that is got some positive lessons in it, because that's so useful in many other ways, right?
Oh, it is. It is. And I think it builds some skills too, right? If you don't
Mm-hmm.
always look at the negative, right? Try and find the positive in those things. And, it's not always easy,
Yeah.
but, there are life lessons in that as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just learning from the negative, you can learn from the positive too.
And
But,
be the adult. Like,
uh,
I don't know how many adults I see that are kind of in this whiny mentality
oh,
and
yeah.
a poor me mentality and life sucks mentality, and it's like, you know what, yeah, yeah, you're not wrong, you're not wrong, life
No.
actually does suck sometimes, and some
Hmm.
situations are not cool, and yet how does it help you or your family to only focus on that and to
Yeah.
somehow feel like the world's against you, right? Because your landlord might sell the house, or like, those are, everybody faces those things.
Absolutely.
So
I
how can
think,
you make it something that doesn't give you heart palpitations? you know?
yes. Well, it's what you make of it, right? And um, I I think always looking at the negative just draws you into that, kind of like that pity party,
Mm-hmm.
right? And
Yeah.
it's okay to turn a negative into a positive. It's okay to do
Mm-hmm.
that. It's not, you don't have to have this, oh, woe is me. You know,
Yeah.
it's
Well, people who are always like glass half empty, they're so miserable and you don't want to
hmm
be around them, and they create the environment that they're afraid of.
yeah,
Because they're everybody's against them, the world is bad, like who wants to be around that energy? So
no,
they create the isolation that they're worried about
hmm
because of that sort of thinking. So
yeah. Like, I mean, it's okay to recognize your feelings because your feelings are valid. Like, you can be
hmm
upset and you can, you know, be frustrated and look at the negative, but turn it into a positive and learn something
yeah, yeah,
productive from it.
yeah, because
But
it doesn't mean those negative things aren't real, they are,
no,
you know,
yeah,
but it just doesn't
and
serve
that's why.
anybody to live in like below the belt, right? Like a half
Hmm.
glass half empty kind of.
Hmm.
It's just makes you miserable. It's like you can't get out of that mindset then to help other people. So
No, no. But I mean,
yeah,
like, have your pity party. Have it for a minute.
mm-hmm.
Wallow in self pity. You
Yeah,
know, maybe a little bit longer than other people would, but then it's time to sober up and get moving
mm-hmm.
and
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
yeah.
So true.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
any last final words for today?
I don't know. Um, I think
Can I talk to the person who does know?
yeah, hold on, let me get them. Let me get them. I don't ever have any sort of like wise words for anybody ever because I don't have wise words for myself,
I
like I
hear plenty
just
of wise words coming out of you.
do you?
Yeah, we just don't get them on camera. No.
No. Right?
Of
Those are
course
like,
we
what
do.
is why are we
Rob
not
just has to
recording
edit
that?
them together. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's
We
all
click off.
blotchy, right?
Yeah, we click off at recording's over, and then Ricky comes out with all her like wisdom, just kind of spills out in
I
these like
know.
great one-liners and memes. Man, Ricky, you're just holding back,
I
aren't
know
you?
what's happening. I get on the camera and I'm like, woo,
Mm-hmm.